money. It was foreplay, one can argue, for what the House has in store for Marcus today. Here's a taste of what the man went through yesterday.
Look at Facebook's record. We'd be crazy to give them a chance to experiment with people's bank accounts, to use powerful tools they don't understand.
We will take the time to get this right. If our country fails to act, we could soon see a digital currency controlled by others whose values are dramatically different from ours.
Do you trust your currency so much that you and your team are willing to see 100% of your compensation be paid to you in that currency? Which it could be if you decided it could.
Senator, if your question is whether I would trust all of my assets in Libra, the answer is yes, I would, because it is backed.
My question was,
and my pay.
Do you trust this enough to make your compensation paid fully in your currency?
Senator, I would, because it is backed one for one with a reserve.
You could have said yes at the beginning of the question then.
Will you at least clarify your answer to Chairman Crapo's question and say Facebook will make sure that WhatsApp and Messenger will support third-party wallets?
Senator,
yes or no?
Senator, I want to clarify because there's a nuance.
Not clarification. This is fair. You didn't answer Chairman Crapo. Please answer my question.
When it comes to cash and carrying around a briefcase full of cash, transnational criminals and terrorist activities don't do that anymore. And what you are creating right now is an opportunity for them to engage in continuing money laundering and criminal activity. So know that.
Ouch. And that was just a bit of the interrogation. A few minutes, as we said, the United States House of Representatives Committee on Financial Services, headed by Chairwoman Maxine Waters, a staunch Democrat from California, will take its swing at David Marcus, Facebook, and the Libra project. Now, Waters is the same Congresswoman who drafted the law proposal, still just in discussion draft, titled Keep Big Tech Out of Finance Act, which details rules that prohibit large internet platforms from becoming financial institutions or offering cryptocurrencies. Now, lots at stake, so to break it down, I am joined in studio by none other, of course, Block TV's senior correspondent, analyst Asher Westrup-Evans. Great to have you, as always. Yaniv Feldman with us, partner at Juno Capital. Hello to you. And from Washington, D.C., joining us, Stephen Paley, attorney at Anderson Kill. Stephen, love having you with us. I'm going to start with you actually off the bat. You just tweeted a short while ago that what David Marcus will be facing today on Capitol Hill is nothing compared to what we saw yesterday. What do you think is in store for him?
It's kind of my analogy is it'll be the equivalent of pro wrestling, sort of the legislative version. They were basically, I mean, one of the things that hung over yesterday's hearing was, if you'll recall, you showed a piece of Senator Brown's questioning, and one of the things he did was he accused Facebook of being complicit in genocide of the Rohingya. Pretty significant accusation, compared them to being toddlers with matches that continue to burn houses down and call it a learning experience. I think when you get into the House and you have people like Representative Sherman, Ocasio-Cortez, and others, you're going to see even more theatrics, even more rhetoric. The Senate in the United States, for those who are watching internationally, tends to be a little bit more staid, right, a little bit more reserved. The House is a little bit, it's a little bit more, we'll see a little bit more bombast, a lot more bombast, I'd say.
That is putting it mildly. So much to explore before that. Asher Westrup-Evans here with us. Indeed, the House, I would equate that to something. I'd like to say the Q&A in the UK on Wednesday, yes. Q&A, but yeah, exactly. But this is going to be bloodier. But that said, Asher, he's going to be facing, people who want to see Libra stopped, essentially.
Certainly. Starting, of course, with none other than the chairwoman, Maxine Waters, who, as you said, has made some strong statements stating that she, in no uncertain terms, wants this process stopped. Of course, that cease and desist letter that she and many other Democrats on that committee put out, very important work, and she has not pulled her punches in any way, shape, or form. In fact, making statements as late as last week that we heard regarding getting them to stop. We can even take a listen to that clip.
I have a lot of questions about Libra, and as you know, I've asked for a moratorium because we all have to get up to speed on what is happening with this new cryptocurrency that is being introduced. I'm concerned about the fact that it's based in Switzerland. What does that mean? We have a lot of information about Switzerland and the fact that there has been a lot of money laundering and other concerns. And so I want to know, first of all, why it's based there. I want to know all of the members now that are in the association, how they were recruited, and what their interests are, and how they plan on dealing with this challenge to the dollar.
Yaniv Feldman also with us. You know, so many beatings yesterday, but at the end of the day, when you speak to people within the crypto sphere, they argue, what is this about Libra? It's not cryptocurrency, it's essentially a gift card. Or, you know, PayPal with a conscience. Go ahead.
Listen, I think that there is a very strong debate in the community whether Libra is or isn't a cryptocurrency, and it depends on how you define it. There's no right answer either way. Having said that, the notion of crypto since Bitcoin was decentralization and not having one strong power backing or controlling the currency so that it can really be decentralized and without a central authority to control it.
Not the case with Libra.
And in Libra, they are trying to mimic something of that sort by creating the Libra Association and dividing the power, but eventually these is just another strong group of strong companies that are standing behind that project. And that's what differentiates that to many of the other projects that we're seeing these days. I think that even compared to other things, compared to other currencies, that's in the middle. If Bitcoin is in the one end of the scale, and I would put, although many would disagree with me, Ripple on the other end of the scale, Libra stands somewhere in the middle in the decentralization scale. It's not completely decentralized, but it's not completely centralized, at least not supposed to be. But then again, you know, for a lot of the people in our community, if it's not aspiring to be completely decentralized like Bitcoin is, or other projects are trying to be, then it's not a cryptocurrency.
Then it's not a cryptocurrency yet. You know, Stephen Paley with us from DC, in the mind of the greater public, and that's the thing that's interesting, and also both the House and the Senate, they're kind of lumped together. And even though Bitcoin was not mentioned that much yesterday, people seem to think, or, you know, that Libra and Bitcoin are the same. Is it good for cryptocurrencies is my first question to you. And secondly, well, let's start with that because then we'll go to China.
The question is are the Libra hearings good for Bitcoin? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It is, you know, one of the things I took from yesterday, and it's similar to my take, was, so let me get this straight. Facebook, which has 2 billion users, is creating a cartel. And I don't think Mark Warner used that term, but he kind of suggested it. Basically, you're creating an organization in Geneva with a bunch of American companies like MasterCard and Visa to create a world currency. That, in my view, has nothing to do with Bitcoin. In part, what I think one take is that what Facebook is doing is trying to solve a problem that Bitcoin mostly, arguably, can solve, with the exception of the stablecoin solution, which is creating a peg to fiat currency. Of course, Bitcoin is very volatile in relation to fiat. So I would say it's neutral as respects Bitcoin. I will also tell you there's some debate. If you talk to people in DC, inside the Beltway, lobbyists, I think there is, you never know who's being paid by whom to tell you what, but the sense I've gotten from speaking to folks who are connected is that there's a feeling that this is, there's a certain inevitability, and whatever is happening rhetorically and theatrically in Congress, things are happening behind the scenes. Whether or not that's true, I guess we won't know for, you know, at least for a little while.
No, please, Yaniv, go ahead.
I think that looking at the effect of Libra on Bitcoin and the crypto market specifically is good no matter how it goes. I mean, if it goes bad and Libra falls on the regulatory steps,
Bitcoin still remains.
Then it creates a huge regulatory moat for Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies because there's no one to send a letter of cease and desist to. That's one hand. And if Libra does pull off and make it through the regulators and actually succeeds, it creates a great on-ramp for Bitcoin by exposing 2 billion people to digital currencies that are not sovereign and the ability to store value and transfer value in a non-fiat way.
But
So
Yeah,
sorry,
we're
go
gonna
ahead.
Stephen, go. You go first. You're in D.C.
Well, it's true, absolutely true, that you can't send a cease and desist letter to Bitcoin, but what you can do is you can frighten banks. You can create banking regulation that makes it difficult for U.S. banks to work to basically to assist with fiat on and off ramp work, which is arguably what statements like Secretary Mnuchin's the other day could have impact on. There are banks in the United States that will not, if they see that you are sending or receiving cash from a crypto exchange, will block the transaction. Wells Fargo, for example. So I'm not sure I would agree. I would agree that you can't send a cease and desist letter to Bitcoin. That's true. You can issue regulations that make it difficult to use Bitcoin for practical purposes. That's not a good.
No, I agree with what you're saying, but the point is you could have done that before Libra anyway. I think that by doing what the regulators are doing to Libra right now, they're pretty much blocking the entire commercial sector from creating a competitor to Bitcoin.
But I suppose in answer to that as well, and perhaps agreeing a little bit with Stephen's point there, that may create, depending on how it's done, and this is I think what the markets are so eager to watch out for, is will Bitcoin and other already established cryptos get pulled down along with Libra? Will they get taken down in the regulatory net along with Libra, which again, as Yaniv points out, it's not going to kill Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a very difficult thing to kill, but you can certainly strangle it, you can bottleneck it, and you can make it very difficult for those institutional players, which so many in the crypto community have said are the inevitable next step to growing the industry, keep them very afraid to enter the market.
And in that respect, I think that goes back, Stephen, it goes back to your point. I want to pose this to everybody. If all of this is posturing, and I tend to agree, just because I'm a cynic, that Facebook would not have gone out of the gate with that announcement unless they had, or they knew, or had discussions in advance with regulators that X, Y, Z will happen. Can all of this be political spin? Let's face it, we live in the age of political spin, and we share wrong stories on social media. But that's what? Come on, Yaniv.
I think yesterday they said that they have spoken to Swiss regulators about being regulated in Switzerland. Swiss regulators said, we don't know what you're talking about. So I don't know if that's a spin, but it's one heck of a spin. I don't know if it's spin,
but you just raised the question of 2019. Who do we believe? That said, yesterday that argument, and Stephen, I'm wondering with you, at the end of his statement, David Marcus was pushing very strong on how much the United States needs Libra, and he said everything but the word China. Would you agree with that?
He did say the U.S. really needs Libra. He said something to the effect of, I think you played the clip, if we don't do it, it'll happen somewhere else with people who don't have our values.
Exactly.
I don't know. Is that true or not true? I have no idea. I will say...
Whether it's true or not true, but there's an argument towards a congressional or a Senate committee, which is almost a national need in a way.
Yeah. Look, a point was made to me yesterday by somebody who spent a long time on the Hill working for, as a legislative aide. It's like, look, some of these are very, very smart people. They don't have a lot of bandwidth. They ask sort of big picture questions. You tell them about the BSA, they ask about the BSA. They're not going to ask granular, in detail questions because they just don't have time. A lot of what happens will happen behind the scenes.
As is the case. But you were saying a Bitcoin, whatever happens, still, I agree, will survive. I think we all will agree will survive. But lots of talk, of course, this morning and chatter because of that all elusive, fluctuating, volatile price. Can we make that correlation?
Oh, look, it seems the timing to be very indicative of some sort of correlation. Again, whether it is causative or not, it's difficult to really pin down. But certainly, I think again those big players, those big institutional players, will be watching these hearings very closely to see how regulators in the U.S. pan out, and that can certainly lead to the sort of fear and anxiety issues that have brought down cryptos in the past. Maybe not for good, maybe only in the short term, but certainly causing a distinct market pullback is possible.
Can the United States administration stop Libra, do we think?
they can do anything. I think as long as it's a commercial entity that acts within current business regulations, they can tell Facebook. By the way, one of the interesting things was that the act that they pulled out, like Stop Big Tech from coming into finance, that says that if a company does that, they pay $1 million fines every day. If you do, and the irony is that Wall Street and big banks, that's how they work. They do things that they shouldn't. They pay fines for it, but they gain so much more actual income out of it, and so it makes it worthwhile for them. And in Facebook's side, in that matter, if Libra does work and if it goes the way they're hoping, $1 million a day, that's 2% of Facebook's current annual income. So.
That's why really Google doesn't seem to care when it comes to antitrust laws in Europe. They'll just pay the fine.
Yeah, that's why Zuckerberg laughed at the $5 billion fine that they got. So, okay, we got a fine. Okay, slap on the wrist. Let's go move ahead.
How do we see this playing out today, Stephen? Of course, it's going to be a lot harsher, but when it comes to the questions, the line of questions, because it's going to be David Marcus sitting there in front of a lot of people that are, how should I put it, very upset that the 2016 election did not go Democratic.
True. It's going to be a lot of theatrics, a lot more people saying they don't like Facebook.
But what would you ask? What would you ask David Marcus if you were sitting in that committee? What question are they missing in your mind?
What question are they missing? I'm not sure. I can't recall if anybody asked whether or not, in their view, why they did not believe this was a security. How is this different from a money market fund? I don't recall if that was asked yesterday. I might be more inclined to ask that than to point out again that nobody likes them. I'm not sure that's an incredibly useful line of questions, but I think we're going to hear a ton of that. Looks like it's about to get started too. So
it's about to get started. They're sitting down. Don't worry. They're going to start the whole 9 yards. I want to just, before we go out to that, remind ourselves of yesterday. And when it comes to people speaking, it was actually security came up over and over again, and yet again that argument that cryptocurrencies are used for bad causes, whatnot. The senator who mentioned that also giving him help to terrorists or issuing was what senator?
That was, it's breaking off the top of my head. Was the senator?
But I think we have that soundbite with
yeah, Cortez Masto from Nevada spoke about that.
Exactly.
I thought that they were prepared for those questions too. Basically, he said we're going to build AML KYC in. I don't actually think that's a solvable problem. They can do that. The question that I had about security was not security from a sort of a hacking,
right?
Or it was more like, is it a security as an asset class?
As an asset, of course.
If what they're creating is a security, which Bitcoin is not, clearly, if they're creating a security, that makes it, as opposed to cash, which is what they say it is, that is problematic from a use and utility standpoint. That's actually one of the questions. If I were on the committee, if I were asking questions, I would dig into that. Like, what is this thing that you're creating? Is this how is this not like a money market fund? How is this not a pooled, how are you not pooling assets and creating interest? I think I'd look at that, and I'd look at the profit behind that, and that would be my focus. That's
entirely. What is it? I think everybody's still wondering. Irrespective of what it is, it was also, I believe, the senator from Montana who actually seemed quite well versed there. By the way, we're looking at live images right now from that congressional hearing on the House. That was Maxine Waters getting ready to what will most likely be opening, and quite an opening statement. She's known for giving opening statements that do not hold back when it comes to the agenda and what that committee has gathered to do now today. Still all gathering there. Waters preparing her papers. I do feel for David. Oh, there's David Marcus, ready for the battle of his life, one can argue, or possibly more lobbying behind the scenes. But it was yesterday that senator from Montana was talking about security in a different way, and it seemed that Libra, irrespective of what it is promising consumers that if something happens, it will act in some way or some shape or form as a bank. And this is what he had to say, I believe, yesterday. No, never mind, that's basically what he said. But in that respect, that's promising something that cryptocurrencies cannot do. And therefore, is that something that will be appealing to consumers?
I think that the fact that first the experience that Facebook would be offering is something that would be much easier for consumers to deal with, the on-ramp, off-ramp, which is one of the toughest things that consumers have to face right now with cryptocurrencies. And in addition to that, they're also, I think it was CZ, the CEO of Binance, who tweeted about this. Facebook already has like 90 times more the identifying data that a normal KYC provider would have on you. So, tracking that to your financial information, even though they said that they won't, would be much more intrusive on the one hand, but much less frightening from an AML KYC perspective on the other. So, again, most consumers, not the way I see them, are not that afraid of privacy. And when I'm saying most, I'm meaning 51%, not 90. But then again, obviously, privacy was one of the things that cryptocurrencies were built for, and we're seeing more and more projects that are geared towards privacy. So I'm assuming there's going to have to be somewhere in between. Even Libra itself does allow, not Calibra, not the wallet,
right, Libra.
But Libra, the blockchain, does allow creation of pseudonymous accounts, meaning that you can, if given or built with another wallet or another platform, you can create and trade assets on the Libra blockchain that are not, natively KYC.
It's an important point as well when it comes to privacy and data collection as well, that while they might be saying that at this stage, Calibra will not be gathering your private data, they will not be selling that back to Facebook, et cetera, promises have been made by many tech providers, financial services providers in the past. Notably, once upon a time, Mark Zuckerberg, in the early days of Facebook, made a statement in which he said that we will never sell the private data we gather. That's not the purpose of Facebook.
He said that in 2009.
Yes, back in 2009,
right.
Exactly. He was leading with that line. I mean, who would ever believe that of this company? Once you get Libra to the point where it's too big to fail, who's to say they keep to the standards they promised to in a congressional hearing a decade prior? If it's too big to fail, then people have to live with the system as it exists.
You know where the statement "too big to fail" comes from? It comes from the U.S. banks that have that they're too big and they have someone willing to back them up in case they fail. Libra doesn't have that, doesn't have anyone to back that up in case they fail. So calling Libra too big to fail or getting there, I'm not sure that that's the right...
well, who knows? I mean, the point is when the economics of the situation becomes supranational and you've got this effectively sovereign currency that exists beyond this other existing sovereign currencies, who's to say what the situation could be? Who's to say what the economics of that situation could be? And as I believe it was Sherrod Brown rightly pointed out, I mean, they move fast and break things. Do we want to do that with the global financial system?
And there's also... Go,
yeah,
Stephen, yes.
No, let's not move fast and break things with a world currency controlled by a cartel of big companies.
Yeah, let's do the same with a big cartel controlled by big governments.
True, but that said, it's and there we have it. Also, as we're speaking here, we're all seeing live pictures, of course, of that room on Capitol Hill, where Maxine Waters, chairman of that committee, is getting ready to start the day for David Marcus, that hearing. She's also the woman, Stephen, I'm wondering with you, she's also the woman behind, at the end of the day, behind this proposed proposed bill, yet only in discussion form, of basically keeping big tech companies. And that seems to be a big battle, I think also there, all tech companies out of finances. Can that something that be something that comes out of this?
Possible. I don't think that I think that's a discussion draft of the bill.
It's a discussion draft at this point. It's not exactly. It's just
a sponsor at this point. So there's a long way to go before that could possibly become. It would have to be sponsored. It would have to be voted out of committee. It would have to go to the floor, be voted on, then have to go to the Senate. Certainly something is possible. I'm trying to think through the legality of a bill that prevents technology companies from having a role in financial services. Something that was too broad would likely be challenged in the courts. We have a long time to go before that discussion draft would become anything.
We're also seeing, as we said, pictures from that committee room as people are gathering, of course, 10 minutes into the start time, but politicians do not heed to the clock when they're getting ready, as people are getting ready. David Marcus, the battle of his life. David Marcus, Yaniv, I believe you know, he has a background in negotiations, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he sold his startup at PayPal. He was VP Mobile and president of PayPal for a long period of time. He headed Messenger, which was Facebook's messaging product in its biggest growth phase. He acquired a lot of companies, and he worked in his days in PayPal, he worked a lot with regulators with regards to financial regulation. So he understands, deeply the language and how things work, in the capital. But then again, that's what Facebook is trying to do here is walking into uncharted territory. I mean, creating.
I thought he was a smooth operator too. I actually thought he did incredibly well. I mean, the question is, the point about the blaming genocide on Facebook, I did wonder if at one point he might have pushed back just a little bit.
I know. There's like, come on, you exactly.
I think he's eating the leftovers of the last Facebook hearing that was back then in the Senate with Mark Zuckerberg. All the questions that weren't asked back then. So he's kind of eating that, but without
that,
any
by
relation
the way,
to
a lot
Libra.
of that will happen today. I do believe a lot of that will happen today because the people sitting in front of him are the people licking the wounds from the 2016 election.
He's good. He was not ruffled. He stayed on message. My guess is we'll see more of that today. Just very, very smooth on message. We're gonna, he repeated over and over again, no matter what the question was, we're gonna do this right. We're gonna make you happy. We won't launch it until we get it right. Now, he didn't say that they wouldn't launch it. I think you have to project an air of inevitability. It's not. The answer is not we're never going to launch it. The answer is we will launch it eventually, and we will make you happy with what we're going to do. And that's that's good rhetoric, good rhetorical style. I think we're going to see another.
I think we're going to see a lot of it. Let's see the man in action a little bit yesterday, taking some heat on that Senate floor. Let's have a listen.
Libra is not meant to compete with bank accounts. We will, for instance, not pay interest. It's like cash, like digital cash.
That's really avoiding the question. Do you trust your currency so much that you and your team are willing to see 100% of your compensation be paid to you in that currency? Which it could be if you decided it could.
Senator, if your question is whether I would trust all of my assets in Libra, the answer is yes, I would, because it is backed.
My question was,
and my pay.
Do you trust this enough to make your compensation paid fully in your currency?
Senator, I would, because it is backed one for one with a reserve.
You could have said yes at the beginning of the question then. Okay.
Senator, with respect, I wanted to clarify that we're not trying to compete with bank deposits.
Okay, let me.
Okay, that's painful to watch a little bit even, I have to say, for the man. But it's important to know that it's David Marcus / Facebook who is sitting in that chair. So that argument, let's start with that argument. How many
come to order.
Hold on, guys, let's break in. There's Maxine
Without
Waters
objection,
opening that committee hearing
recess of
Libra.
the committee at any time. This hearing is entitled Examining Facebook's Proposed Cryptocurrency and Its Impact on Consumers, Investors, and the American Financial System. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes to give an opening statement. Today, we're here for a hearing on Facebook's proposed digital currency, Libra, and digital wallet, Calibra, and their impacts on consumers, investors, and the financial system. Our first witness is David Marcus, Calibra's CEO. Following his testimony, a panel of experts will share their views on Facebook's plans. I have serious concerns with Facebook's plans to create a digital currency and digital wallet and its efforts to enlist partners that expand its reach, like MasterCard, PayPal, Visa, Uber, Lyft, and Spotify. Facebook is apparently trying to create a new global financial system that is intended to rival the US dollar. This venture is slated to be based in Switzerland, which has a history of a monetary haven for criminals and shady corporations. Facebook's plans raise serious privacy, trading, national security, and monetary policy concerns, not only for Facebook's over 2 billion users who will have immediate access to these products, but also for consumers, investors, and the global economy. In addition, Facebook has proposed backing Libra tokens with government currencies and government-guaranteed securities and holding them in a so-called Libra reserve to be governed by Facebook and its partners. Ownership of government assets on such a massive scale without proper oversight threatens to concentrate government influence in the hands of a few elites. Ultimately, if Facebook's plans come to fruition, the company and its partners will yield immense economic power that could destabilize currencies and governments. Facebook's proposed entry into financial services is all the more troubling because it has already harmed vast numbers of people on a scale similar to Wells Fargo and demonstrated a pattern of failing to keep consumer data private on a scale similar to Equifax. Facebook remains under a 2011 consent order from the Federal Trade Commission for deceiving consumers and failing to keep consumer data private. In the wake of the Cambridge Analytica scandal, in which Facebook provided 50 million users private data to a political consulting firm, the company will reportedly pay a record $5 billion fine to the FTC for data privacy failures. In addition, Facebook has allegedly insecurely stored user passwords dating back to 2012, paid unsuspecting teenagers to download spyware, experienced a hack of nearly 50 million accounts, and experienced a software bug that granted third-party access to 6.8 million users' photos. It has also been sued by HUD and civil rights groups for violations of the Fair Housing Act in what amounts to modern-day redlining. Facebook also allowed malicious Russian state actors to purchase and target ads in a campaign to influence the 2016 election.
There's Maxine Waters, of course, in that ever all important hearing at the House on Capitol Hill. Facebook, Libra facing that panel of Congress people who want to see anything but Libra launched. We will be bringing this live. We're going to want to thank very much Stephen Paley, attorney at Anderson Kill, and of course we here at Block TV will be back at the end of this back and forth to see what amounted.
Regulators and Congress can examine the issues associated with a large technology company developing a digital currency and take action. The Independent Community Bankers of America and others support this common sense step. Facebook's plans also raise larger concerns about big tech's expansion into financial services as it appears to inappropriately mix commerce and banking activities. So, today we will discuss the draft bill, the Keep Big Tech Out of Finance Act, which would prevent large platform utilities like Facebook from becoming financial institutions and block them from creating their own currencies. Today's hearing is only the first step in our oversight and legislative process. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses. The chair now recognizes the ranking member of the committee, the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. McHenry, for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
We're here to go beyond the headlines. We're here to sift through the speculation and the hearsay. Here's just one of my favorite headlines, which asks, is Facebook forming a crypto mafia as Libra Foundation members boost each other's businesses? Washington must go beyond the hype and ensure that it's not the place where innovation goes to die. Just because we may not fully understand a new technology proposal does not mean we should immediately call for its prohibition, especially when that proposal is just that, a proposal. But let's face it, let's be honest, it's Facebook. And I'm skeptical, but we can either make you a political talking point or we can choose to conduct thoughtful governmental oversight. That's my hope for this day, is its thoughtful government oversight. The reality is, whether Facebook is involved or not, change is here. Digital currencies exist. Blockchain technology is real. And Facebook's entry in this new world is just confirmation, albeit at scale. The world that Satoshi Nakamoto, author of the Bitcoin white paper, envisioned, and others are building, is an unstoppable force. We should not attempt to deter this innovation, and governments cannot stop this innovation. And those that have tried have already failed. So the question then becomes, what are American policymakers going to do to meet the challenges and the opportunities of this new world of innovation? Some politicians want us to live in a permission-based society where you need to come to government, ask for its blessing before you can begin to even think about innovating. Those are the politicians that would rather kill it before it grows. But there are others who believe in the vibrancy of American ingenuity, American innovation, that recognizes our economy is built off of generations of entrepreneurs and innovators through competition, through testing, through tinkering, through iterating, got us here today. To be clear, it's not about advocating for a break it and figure it out later approach, but when it comes to finances, we must ensure that consumers and investors are protected. So, Mr. Marcus, let's get to work. Let's have that conversation. Let's answer those questions. Instead of a knee-jerk reaction of banning something before it begins, my Republican colleagues and I want to first try and understand it. And in turn, based off what we learn, determine whether or not our current regulatory framework meets the demands of this new technology. That's why we're here today. Look, I don't have a crystal ball. I have no idea if Libra will lead to greater financial inclusion, lower remittance costs, which have the opportunity and would mean families could send money to each other more cheaply and easily than today, or if it's just a ploy to shoot Facebook's Twitter mentions through the roof. We'll see. But what I do know is this. Republicans stand ready to work with innovators to successfully implement responsible technology here in the United States, here domestically, before we lose out to other countries around the world. So I ask my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to join together in supporting innovation, ingenuity, and the entrepreneurial spirit that this nation was founded upon. I'm grateful for this hearing. I called on Chairwoman Waters to have this hearing a month ago, and this is a bipartisan approach to oversight. And with that, I'd like to yield the balance of my time to Mr. Hill.
I thank the ranking member. This time of hearing touches on critical areas of jurisdiction within our committee. FinTech innovation, oversight questions related to the use of and trading of cryptocurrencies, and the intersections of financial services and big data. We therefore must ensure that we're asking thoughtful questions as we learn about and analyze these rapidly emerging trends. As a former community banker, I understand the importance with appropriate regulation and balance to benefit American consumers. And as lawmakers, we all need to ensure that all the companies that operate here in America with American consumers are in full compliance of those laws. America is evolving into a digital era, and we need to make sure that we're asking the right questions. I urge my colleagues to do that, but always trust but verify. Yield back.
Today we have two panels. I want to welcome our first witness, Mr. David Marcus, Chief Executive Officer of Calibra. David Marcus has been CEO of Calibra for the last 2 months and also identifies himself as working for Facebook. Prior to Calibra, Mr. Marcus explored blockchain and served as Vice President for Messaging Products for Facebook. He has also served as president of PayPal and other tech companies. Mr. Marcus, without objection, your written statement will be made part of the record. You will have 5 minutes to summarize your testimony. When you have 1 minute remaining, a yellow light will appear. At that time, I would ask you to wrap up your testimony so we can be respectful of both the committee's members' time and others. Mr. Marcus, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to present your oral testimony.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Chairwoman Waters, Ranking Member McHenry, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is David Marcus, and I'm the head of Calibra at Facebook. For most of my life, I've been an entrepreneur building products aimed at improving people's lives. For many years, my focus has been financial services. I became PayPal's president after it acquired my last startup, and I moved to Facebook about 5 years ago to run Messenger and more recently to lead our blockchain efforts. In my written testimony, I described the mechanics of Libra. Today, I want to explain why I'm optimistic about what Libra can offer the world. But before I get there, I want to make clear that we recognize we are only at the beginning of this journey. Federal Reserve Chairman Powell has said publicly that the process for launching Libra needs to be patient and thorough, rather than a sprint to implementation. Secretary Mnuchin reinforced those views at his recent press conference. We strongly agree with both of them. We will take the time to get this right. We expect the review of Libra to be among the most extensive ever. We are fully committed to working with regulators here and around the world. Chairwoman Waters, speaking on behalf of Facebook, I pledge to you that Facebook will not offer the Libra digital currency until we have fully addressed regulators' concerns and received appropriate approvals. I'd like to start by sharing the vision for Libra. Libra is intended to address an important problem. Imagine a daughter who wants to send money home to her mom in another country. Of the $200 she sends, $14 on average will be lost because of fees. It can also take several days or even a week for the mother to receive the money, a delay that can prove disastrous in an emergency. Not to mention, lines may be long and collection points may be in high crime areas. But it doesn't have to be that way. Wouldn't it be easier and safer if people could securely and inexpensively receive money transfers through their smartphones, just like they do for so many other things today? That's what Libra is about, developing a safe, secure, and low-cost way for people to efficiently move money around the world. To realize Libra's promise, Facebook and 27 other organizations have founded the Independent Libra Association. These include companies in the payments, technology, telecommunications, blockchain, and venture capital industries, and nonprofits like Women's World Banking, who is here today, along with staff from the Libra Association. The Libra Association will govern the Libra blockchain network and administer the Libra Reserve. It will establish the rules of the road and will prioritize privacy and consumer protection. And it will implement safeguards that require service providers in the Libra network to fight money laundering, terrorism financing, and other financial crimes. We expect these safeguards will at least meet, if not exceed, existing standards and improve the integrity of the global financial system. When fully formed, we expect the Libra Association to include 100 diverse members. Facebook will only have one vote and will not be in a position to control the association. Nor will Facebook or the Libra Association position themselves to compete with sovereign currency or interfere with monetary policy. In fact, the association will work with the Federal Reserve and other central banks to minimize the risk of any competition with their currencies or interference with their monetary policy. These are areas properly the province of central banks. Finally, I would like to turn to Facebook's role in realizing the potential of Libra. To facilitate Libra's use, Facebook has established a subsidiary known as Calibra that will offer one of many digital wallets on the Libra network. Using the Calibra wallet, consumers will be able to save, spend, and send Libra right from their smartphones. If this is successful, Facebook will benefit from more commerce across the family of apps that it operates. Calibra will be affordable and accessible and also be safe and secure with strong safeguards to protect users' accounts and information. We expect that the Calibra wallet will be governed by rules administered or enforced by FinCEN, OFAC, and the FTC. It will also be regulated by state financial regulators. Calibra is committed to protecting the privacy of its customers. The Calibra wallet will not share individual customer data with the Libra Association or even with Facebook, except for limited circumstances such as preventing fraud or criminal activity and complying with the law. I'm excited about the potential that Libra and Calibra hold, and I am proud that we have initiated this effort here in the United States. I believe that if America doesn't lead innovation in digital currency and payments, others will. If our country fails to act, we could soon see a digital currency controlled by others whose values are dramatically different from ours. I believe that Libra can drive positive change for many people and can provide an opportunity for leadership consistent with our shared values. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. I recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. Mr. Marcus, Facebook's 2.7 billion users entrust you with their most intimate thoughts, pictures, feelings, ideas, and sensitive information. Yet, at every opportunity to demonstrate growth, competence, and responsibility, Facebook has let us down. As I already noted, Facebook has a long list of scandals, including its repeated failures to safeguard its users' data. You've said that we don't need to trust Facebook because it will only be one of 100 members in the Libra Association that will manage this product and this project. But that's not entirely true, is it? The project was Facebook's idea. Facebook is spearheading it and recruiting partners. Facebook's subsidiary, Libra, will provide consumers with a digital wallet to store Libra tokens. As I understand it, no member of the association has paid anything towards the project. So my question is, why should we trust Facebook to do these activities?
Thank you, Chairwoman. I think trust is really essential, and it's clear we've made mistakes. I believe we're owning these mistakes and working hard in remedying them and working hard at improving on all fronts. But as far as the Libra Association is concerned and the way that this project has been developed, we have invested everything that has been invested so far in Libra. You're absolutely right. And we have built all of the code base, the technology, up to this point. But we have also donated, if you will, the technology because it's now open source for the whole world to be able to use and leverage. As a result, we are not controlling the code base. And by the time we launch, we will be one of 100 members with no special privilege. As far as the wallet is concerned, I believe that the idea here often is that one day we will launch and suddenly 2 billion people will arrive on the Libra wallet. This is not the approach we're taking. People will have to open specific Libra accounts, so they're not going to be able to use their Facebook account. They have to open new accounts. And in order for them to do that, they will have to upload a government-issued ID to identify so that we can meet our KYC requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus. I can appreciate that you understand that there is a trust problem here, given its disregard for U.S. law and its massive scale. I think foreign countries could find it difficult to effectively regulate Facebook, Libra or Libra. It isn't clear the Federal Reserve or other U.S. regulators have the authority to regulate you. And yesterday, the Swiss regulator that you're saying would regulate you actually said that it has never been contacted by Facebook about this project. So, Mr. Marcus, you responded to a request by members of this committee for a moratorium on your activities by stating that you would continue to work with regulators before going forward. But if the regulators lack the authority to adequately oversee you, how can you work with them to resolve concerns? Will you stop kind of dancing around this question and commit here in this committee before the duly elected representatives of the American people to a moratorium until Congress enacts an appropriate legal framework to ensure that Libra and Libra do what you claim it is intended to do, which is to serve the public's good? Let me just say that we are all in support of innovation. It's not one side of the aisle versus another side of the aisle. But if you talk to any member on this committee, they will know nothing about Libra, they will know nothing about Libra, they will know nothing about how it is organized, they will know nothing about the role that Facebook is going to play in this big association that now has 28 companies and looking to get 100 companies. And so, despite the fact that we all support innovation and we all understand what is important for our economy to grow and for development and for the future of this country, we need to be on top of and understand something as massive as this project. And that does not say we don't support innovation. With that, I will turn to the gentleman. Well, yes, if he has time to answer. Please, go right ahead.
Chairwoman, I agree with you that this needs to be analyzed, understood, and the proper oversight needs to be set up before Libra can launch. And this is in this spirit that we released a white paper very early before any launch so that we could have the time to engage with all of the proper regulators and central banks and lawmakers to ensure that we will get this right. And this is my commitment to you, Chairwoman. We will take the time to get this right.
Thank you very much. The gentleman from North Carolina, Ranking Member Mr. McHenry, is recognized for 5 minutes.
So I want to keep this simple. So, Mr. Marcus, I've read your white paper. I understand the nature of digital currency and digital technology. What is a Libra?
Congressman, Libra is a digital currency, a reserve-backed digital currency.
Is that a security?
We don't believe it is, Congressman.
Is it a commodity?
Congressman, based on current U.S. law, I believe it might be a commodity, but we see it as a payment tool.
Is it an exchange-traded fund?
It is not, Congressman.
Okay, so when you say that, so it's none of the above in any pure form, like other digital currencies, correct?
Congressman, it is designed to be a payment tool.
A payment tool. Okay, so if it's none of the above in our current regulatory structure, what I'm really getting at is how do you comply with regulations?
Congressman, the way that we comply with regulations is in a number of ways. First, as far as the Calibra wallet is concerned, it's registered as a money services business with Treasury and with FinCEN. It is applying and has received a number of state licenses and will operate the same way that other wallets operate. As far as
that's Calibra. I'm asking about Libra.
So as far as the Libra Association is concerned, these are active conversations we're having, notably with the working group of the G7, as well as FINMA, which is the Swiss financial regulator.
Okay, so there's tension between the notion of a decentralized currency or something decentralized and ultimately privacy and ultimately anti-money laundering and know your customer elements. These things stand in conflict with one another and very difficult things to resolve. In your white paper, you say after 5 years, there'll be a transition point. And you will go from a permissioned-based to a permissionless system. Post-transition, how do you reconcile the need for controls which allow you to comply with anti-money laundering and KYC, know your customer regulations, with that decentralized notion of a fully decentralized digital currency?
It's a very good question, Congressman. And the way that this will work is that the association will still have the ability to set the rules when it comes to anti-money laundering programs, CFT and KYC requirements for the network. And what we expect, even when the network transitions to permissionless without getting lost in the weeds, is that the vast majority of validators will likely be the ones providing services, so likely larger companies.
So you're saying in the nature of the wallet, that's how you get to anti-money laundering, know your customer, not the nature of the digital currency. So going to a permissioned, going from permissioned system with these nodes, ultimately 100, to a permissionless system, you're saying it's not going to be in the nature of that technology of a Libra, it'll be in the nature of the wallets on either side of this?
That is correct, Congressman, but on top of that, the Libra Association will continue to have an AML program and will still be under the supervision of FinCEN.
Okay, so getting into that question of anti-money laundering provisions, and complying with FinCEN, is your view that you're going to be like Western Union, or is it going to be your view that you're more like your former employer PayPal?
Congressman, I believe that it depends about the entities you're talking about. As far as the wallets are concerned, it will definitely be more like the PayPal types of businesses that operates in the payments space. And as far as the Libra Association is concerned, that is the conversation we're having because...
So is this your view, the development internally at Facebook, is for you to be a competitor to Alipay and to WePay?
Congressman, yes.
And to be a competitor to Venmo and PayPal, which are basically the same.
So yes, we have a number of wallets that are working with us on the network side, but that will compete on the wallet side on the network.
Will that consumer data be kept separate or a part of the Calibra data collected from consumers? Will that be a part of Facebook's overall knowledge of consumers, or will it be separate and distinct?
No, Congressman, we will make strong commitment to keep that data separated from social data.
Separate and distinct.
Yes.
Final question here. So if you're seeking to be a competitor to Alipay and to WeChat, why are you doing this in Switzerland? And why are you using a basket of currencies? Why not the good old American dollar? And to bring down the transaction costs, which is seemingly the ultimate goal here.
Congressman, first, I want to say that the choice of Switzerland has nothing to do about evading responsibilities or oversight. The goal of Switzerland is to home this Libra association in an international place that is the home of
skip
WTO.
beyond that.
And so that's really why. The second thing is, for the same reason, we would like for Libra to be a digital global currency, and as a result to be one unit of digital currency for the whole world. And this is why we believe it was the right approach.
Thank you.
The gentlewoman from New York, Mrs. Maloney, who is also the chair for the Subcommittee on Investor Protection, Entrepreneurship and Capital Markets, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Marcus, as you can see, there are a lot of questions about this project. It's big and very bold. Some would say it's too bold. The chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jay Powell, was in here just last week saying that he thinks it could be a systemic risk. The former chairman of the CFTC, Gary Gensler, is going to testify later that he believes it should be covered by the Investment Company Act. So we have a lot of concerns and a lot of questions, and I take it that it's a no to the chairwoman's question about requesting a moratorium on Libra until policymakers can figure out how to handle it. Was that a yes or no to her question when she called for a moratorium?
Congresswoman, the commitment is that we will not launch until we have addressed all concerns fully and have the proper
I take that as a no.
approval.
Okay, so what I want to ask you, will you commit right here in this hearing room to walk before you run? Will you commit to doing a small pilot program for Libra First, limited to no more than 1 million users and overseen by the Federal Reserve and the SEC? Will you commit to that?
Congresswoman, the steps we have taken, and this is the reason why we announced the white paper and the plans instead of launching and then figuring it out after, which is what happens sometimes with technology products, most often actually. In this very case, we are deliberate about taking the time to get this right. And
but that's seriously, in all due respect, that's not what I asked you. And given the lack of trust of people have in Facebook, you've breached the trust of users over and over again. Just last week, you were reportedly fined $5 billion for selling your users' private data without their knowledge or permission. So I would like to ask you again, will you commit to walking before you run? Because if you go ahead and launch Libra without doing a pilot program first, there are too many risks. The Libra Reserve could be managing too much money, which could make it systemic. Too much money could be pulled out of banks in order to buy Libra, which former FDIC Chair Sheila Bair has written about and warned about. So the risks are very great. Now, personally, and this is only my own personal belief, I don't think you should launch Libra at all, because the creation of a new currency is a core government function and should be left to democratically accountable institutions that are accountable to the American people. But at the very least, you should agree to do this small pilot program first, fully overseen by you and the Federal Reserve and the SEC. I think that's a modest request. So will you commit right now to doing a small pilot program first, yes or no?
Congresswoman, we will continue to engage with regulators and the working group at the G7 that is notably looking after the issues that you raised to ensure that however we launch this, it is responsibly and it is with the appropriate oversight and in a very responsible way. You have my commitment on that.
Well, if you will not commit to testing this out as a pilot program first, I think it's a reasonable request, then I think that Congress should seriously consider stopping this project from moving forward. Now, there's a lot of concern about Facebook. A lot of people think that it's really become too powerful, that it's become a monopoly. And now you're telling us that Facebook's digital wallet for Libra, called Calibra, will be the only wallet that can be embedded into WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. Given how dominant these two apps are, I think that raises serious concerns about market concentration and potentially monopoly concerns. So will you commit to allowing third-party wallets on WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger?
Congresswoman, may I answer the one point about what you said earlier? I just want to address it really quick, which is that the current system is really not working for people and for way too many people, and others are leading and plowing ahead, and I believe that if we
Please, sir, would you answer my question? I get to ask the questions in this committee. And will you commit to allowing the third-party wallets on WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger? Yes or no? It's a simple question. Yes or no?
Congresswoman, other wallets are going to actually be interoperable with the Calibra wallets that will be integrated in WhatsApp.
So do you believe in competition and market access? If you believed in it, then you would allow them to be embedded also, third-party. Will you allow it?
Gentlelady's time has expired.
Thank you.
The gentlewoman from Missouri, Ms. Wagner, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'm concerned that a 2020 launch date demonstrates deep insensitivities around how Libra could impact U.S. national security, the global financial system, the privacy of people across the globe, criminal activity, and international human rights. Mr. Marcus, I have a number of questions, so let's try and move as expeditiously as possible. Are you taking any steps to ensure that the dollar is not overtaken as the leading international currency that undergirds global economic stability?
Yes, Congresswoman, and the first of many steps is that the dollar is most likely going to be the predominant part of the reserve.
It's 58%, generally speaking. Euro about 19. I don't know what your numbers are in terms of.
Well, Congresswoman, the dollar will be one of the predominant currency backing Libra, and then the other part is really the engagement that we currently have with the G7 working group, with the Fed, and with the Financial Stability Board. We'll continue to engage in those conversations.
I serve as also as the vice-ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and I'm hoping to understand how the U.S. government could effectively implement sanctions if Libra were to take off. As you likely know, North Korea uses cryptocurrencies to evade our sanctions all the time. If the Treasury Department demanded the Libra Association blacklist certain Libra addresses in order to comply with U.S. sanctions, how would Libra respond?
Congresswoman, I want to make a strong point here because it's really important. Whether Libra launches or it doesn't launch, there will be other networks. There are other networks. There are other cryptocurrencies. And those are not coming here.
You're not suggesting that it's okay if others evade U.S. sanctions, and it's okay if Libra does.
I am absolutely not saying that, Congresswoman, and that's why I'm saying that we are here and we are engaging with FinCEN. The Libra Association will be also registered with FinCEN, and we will have strong AML KYC program as well as from all of the wallets operating here in the United States, of course, full enforcement of sanctions and then some. So
Libra could have significant geopolitical implications. Frankly, from a human rights perspective, for instance, despotic leaders could ban Libra and penalize users. How are you approaching establishing appropriate human rights safeguards as you develop the Libra platform?
Congresswoman, I believe that one of the driving forces of the association being financial inclusion, we will have the right representatives around the table.
Which specific organizations? Because your folks sure couldn't answer that to us yesterday when I asked. Which ones are you specifically working with to address potential human rights impact?
So we have Mercy Corps, Women Worlds Banking, and Kiva that are already founding members of the Libra Association, and there will be more organizations that have dedicated all of their lives and energy in addressing the very problems that you're raising.
I'm curious to understand how you think the Libra platform would interact with Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which prevents state and local law enforcement from protecting citizens from illicit activities. For instance, if Libra is explicitly being used to further a criminal act negotiated on Facebook Messenger.
Congresswoman, Section 230, as I understand it, is relating to the Facebook technology product, and we have the protections of Section 230. I don't believe that this applies to payments.
Terrorists and criminals use Facebook to fundraise, to recruit, and connect with buyers. Facebook's moderation just does not seem up to the task, and Libra could make it, I believe, even easier for these nefarious actors to move money. Before launching Libra and potentially compounding the situation, how will you be addressing the digital back markets that run rampant on the Facebook platform?
Congresswoman, the first way we will do that is ensuring that on the Calibra wallet, everyone who opens a Calibra account has to identify with a government-issued ID, and as a result, we will have strong identity and a full staffed team to address.
My time is expired. I yield back to the chair. I have other questions I will submit for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. The gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Velasquez, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Marcos, we do not want to stifle innovation, but we do have a healthy dose of skepticism. So this is not Silicon Valley. You cannot work out problems as you go. So all those problems need to be resolved and worked out before you launch Libra. So for the third time on this side, I pose the question to you. Will you commit yourself to not launch Libra before all the concerns from the Federal Reserve and all the regulators are addressed? Yes or no?
Absolutely.
Yes or no?
Absolutely, Congresswoman. Okay. And I want to reiterate this commitment that this was the spirit in which we announced early, and we will do what's right to address all
I just want a yes or no answer. Thank you. So, Mr. Marcos, we gave the Federal Reserve increased oversight over non-banks. We don't know yet what you are. If the STOC designated you a CFI, would you submit to enhanced oversight?
Congresswoman, I don't believe that
But you don't know what you are, so...
No, but Congresswoman, the Libra Association or Calibra have no plans to engage in banking activities. As far as the Calibra wallet is concerned, we will be active in the payment space, like many other non-banks are active in the payment space. But that said, we will, of course, comply with all regulations.
So we want to make sure that companies that did not fall into the normal bucket of regulatory authority could not threaten the U.S. financial system. So I would like to ask you, according to the Libra Association's white paper, members of the Libra Association will consist of geographically distributed and diverse businesses, not-for-profit and multilateral organizations and academic institutions. Sir, by what criteria were the initial members of the association chosen?
Thank you for your question, Congresswoman. The way that the initial members joined was as a result of a wide outreach, and it's a combination of companies that can accelerate the acceptance and utility of Libra, like companies like Uber and Lyft and Spotify, that can accelerate the acceptance of Libra within current merchant networks like Visa and MasterCard, that can inform how to drive financial inclusion, like Mercy Corps, Kiva, and Women World Banking. And now we are starting, the Libra Association is starting that phase of welcoming more members that will be even...
Okay, I hear you. You want to get to 100, right?
That is correct.
Yes. So if a member were to determine that they no longer wish to participate in the association, what is the process for withdrawal?
Congresswoman, at this stage, we're in the process, all of us, the 28 organizations, of ratifying the charter. And as a result of this process...
So you don't know yet?
No, as a result of this process, if members do not wish to participate, they can drop, and there will be a process on an ongoing basis for members that do not wish to participate.
So do you think a member's withdrawal could threaten the value of the Libra currency?
No, I don't believe that's the case, Congresswoman.
Mr. Marcos, according to the Libra Association's white paper, the Libra Association has a target launch of the first half of 2020. When you expect the association's charter to be finalized, and will the charter be available for review by regulators, lawmakers, and the public?
Absolutely, Congresswoman.
According to, this question was asked before, so I will yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. Point of clarification, Mr. Marcus, did you commit to the moratorium to Ms. Velasquez?
Chairwoman, I committed to waiting.
Excuse me, I just need a yes or no.
Chairwoman, I just want to be precise. I committed to waiting for us to have all the appropriate regulatory approvals and have addressed all concerns before
Thank you very much.
Forward.
Thank you very much. That's not a commitment. I wanted to clarify that. The gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Hill, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank the Chairwoman. Mr. Marcus, again, thank you for being here. I wanted to talk a little bit about what appears to be a core business element for Calibra, and that is the issue of remittances. The World Bank says that the single most important challenge in remittances around the world is lack of transparency and cost, and the average global cost of remittances is about 7%. So tell me what fees you'll be charging for moving money inside the Calibra system.
Congressman, the goal for Calibra is to charge very little or nothing at all for P2P transactions, or for person-to-person transactions. We're hoping that we can offer that part of the service for free.
And then therefore on B2B or B2C, you'd be charging something
there will likely
in Libra currency, fractional Libra currency.
There will likely be small merchant fees that will be competitive, very competitive with the current fees that are paid by merchants.
And inside the Calibra system, you'll earn revenue from advertising as well?
No, Congressman, no advertising in Calibra. The Calibra revenue streams, when we start working on that, which we haven't at all and we don't plan to for a number of years, will likely be by offering a range of financial services and partnerships with existing financial institutions and banks.
And so in those remittances, which are so important to countries all over the world, we know what percentage of GDP remittances represent, particularly in Central America and Mexico. I think it's the third largest source of hard currency in Mexico, for example, 20% in Honduras. Both sides of that equation would be subject to KYC?
Yes, Congressman. On the Libra wallet, you will not be able to open an account without having proper KYC.
And one of the issues in the third world, obviously, is they don't have a stable currency and are subject to inflation, terrible inflation. I think I read a note that 94 countries, representing 48% of the world's population and 16% of world GDP, experience on a regular basis 10% or more inflation per year. So is it your view that Libra wallet will have a more stable currency than their local currency, or more stable value, I should say, than their local currency?
Congressman, the way we've designed the reserve, and again, subject to proper oversight and review from the G7 working group and others, is to have a very stable, value retentive digital currency. So yes, it will be a very high quality digital currency in a number of countries that are currently receiving a lot of their income from abroad. They will now receive a lot of their income from abroad in a stable currency that will retain its value.
What do you think, though, about, obviously, many of those same third world countries and some larger than third world have very strict controls on foreign currency. They have currency controls. They have currency boards. They don't allow their consumers to take action outside their home currency. They don't allow their home currency to be taken out of the country. How does Libra plan on dealing with that?
Congressman, this is going to be a country-by-country answer. There are lots of countries that have the problems you highlighted and that don't have currency controls that we think we can address right away. And then for other countries, it will definitely be a country-by-country approach. The one thing I want to highlight, though, is the fact that any wallet, not only Libra, any wallet that is actually built on top of the Libra network will be interoperable with one another, meaning that to provide the value that we intend to provide for so many people, we don't need to be the only wallet. And in certain regions, it will be other wallets, but they would still benefit from interoperability.
I thought that was an interesting conversation with my friend from New York about the exclusivity of the wallet, Libra wallet at WhatsApp, for example. You do plan on having, and you have 100 members that aren't interested in Facebook having any more monopoly than they do now. So would you have Visa's debit credit system available as a wallet?
Congressman, we will have a number of other payment methods for commerce on the Facebook platform and Instagram as well, including debit, credit cards, other wallets. And as far as P2P payments, there will be more.
There will be competition on P2P payments, even on Facebook's application.
There will be on traditional currencies, the same way that in Messenger you can currently use debit cards to do P2P.
Yield back. Thank you, Chair.
The gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, who is also the chair for the Subcommittee on Consumer Protection and Financial Institutions, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Marcus, thank you for your testimony. I can say with confidence that Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, and the entire subprime mortgage ecosystem did not set out to bring the global financial system to its knees. I can say with confidence that the legitimately brilliant minds and Nobel Prize winners, in fact, behind LTCM, did not set out to trigger the Asian financial crisis, but they nearly broke the global markets. And I can also say with confidence that the deregulation of the early 1980s and bankers did not set out to trigger the savings and loans crises, but it did. Not only that, they all typically founded their logic in innovation, expanding access to financial services, and arguments of inclusion. And yet, they all broke the system. And the people at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder systemically paid the heaviest price. So, you may be speaking earnestly when you tell us the lofty goals, but I was here in Congress when Secretary Paulson came to us and told us we were within days of a complete shutdown of the global financial system. Now, I don't expect you to understand what that was like, but I assure you it was absolutely terrifying and one of my worst moments in Congress. Now, I want America to remain a global leader in financial services and innovation, and I believe that we have regulators, et cetera, that are the best in the world. But let's do this. Let's assume that Facebook manages to get even just 10% of its current user base to the Facebook Libra wallet. Do you understand that that would absolutely make you a systemically risky financial institution, and that we would expect FSOC to designate you as such, and the Fed to create a special regulatory oversight program for Facebook accordingly? Would you agree to this?
Congressman, first of all, I want to recommit. We will actually...
Yes or no? Would you agree to this?
I do want to share that if we had 10% of the Facebook...
I've only got a small amount of time.
I want to answer your question to the best of my ability, Congressman. And if we had 10% of our user base, which is 200 million people using a Libra wallet, we would be the same size of many other non-bank payments wallets around the world, including here in the U.S., including another one that is part of the association.
Let me reclaim my time. You're not answering my question, because even banks, anybody that's holding money would be considered a bank. Well, let me ask this. Do you agree that, defined simply, an organization that holds deposits and makes loans is a bank? Similarly, banks in the past did issue their own currency or IOUs and clear their payments. Finally, some banks are run as nonprofit organizations or cooperatives. Therefore, are both Facebook and Libra organizations planning to establish bank holding companies with full organization and capital structure we require to protect the global financial system from systemic risks and systemic collapse?
Congressman, we will not engage in banking services. We will focus on payments.
Well, you're taking people's money, right? And you're holding their money, correct?
The same way that you have Venmo and PayPal and Square Cash and a number of other payment companies.
So what you're telling me is you're not going to organize as a bank. You didn't answer my first question, which would put you under the regulations of FSOC and others, so that we can make sure that there's no systemic risk here because of what you're doing in your size that could bring down the entire federal government, the entire financial services industry. But let me ask you one more. I got 40. In Dodd-Frank, we established the CFPB to serve as a financial regulator focused specifically on the best interests of consumers. Do you believe that the CFPB currently has authority over both the Libra organization and the Facebook Libra wallet? And why did you not conclude, do you think the CFPB have jurisdiction?
Congressman, we're engaged in conversation with all FSOC agencies, including CFPB, and it is not for me to decide who has appropriate oversights. But
so why didn't you did not include compliance with CFPB in your prepared testimony?
Congressman, this is because we're currently engaged with all of these agencies, and I wanted to share where we were right now at this point in time with the knowledge we have at this time. But we will have a more complete outreach by the time we are ready for launch, because we're going to take the time to get this right.
Clarification, I understand that you're absolutely opposed to FSOC's oversight, and that you don't think they should be allowed to designate you as a SIFI. Is that right?
Chairwoman, I'm not opposed to any regulation, and we have had conversations with FSOC.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We'll move on to the next person. The gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Lukemeyer, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Over here, Mr. Marcus. Thank you. You made a statement a while ago that you said that the current system is not working. And it concerns me, because I think the current system is working. It's not working as efficiently maybe as you'd like it to see that it works. But I think, the system right now works because it's kind of like traffic control. If you're on a country road and you have, like 5 cars a day through an intersection, you don't need traffic control and you can go wherever you want to do, and it doesn't cost you any time to go through an intersection. If you've got an intersection that's got 30,000 cars a day going through it, you need some traffic control to go through there to protect people for safety purposes, as to be able to transact, their ability to go through that thing in an efficient way. And I think, you're talking about the size and scope of money transactions, and yeah, it costs a little bit of money right now to be able to transfer money around the world, but that's because of safety and security concerns, as well as the mechanisms that are in place to be able to do that. I think what you're trying to do is take away some of those costs, but we're concerned about the safety and transactional transparency of what's going on here. So the system is working, but you'd like to improve it, is what I think you meant to say a while ago. Is that right?
Congressman, first, I really believe that the system is not working for way too many people right now. And I don't believe that the reason the people who earn less and who have less pay more is because of the regulation and having KYC and AML. I believe we can do that at a much lower cost.
Okay.
I believe that technology can lower costs.
What you just said, though, is you agree the system is working, it's just not working as efficiently as you like to see it. Well, so I accept that. Something else you said a while ago you said that you want to offer more financial services as you go down the road. And just a minute ago you said you want to offer no banking services. So which one is it? Are you going to have deposits down the road that you pay interest on? Are you going to take deposits at all? Are you going to have lending that you're going to be doing to some of the customers? What kind of financial services or banking services are you intending to grow into?
Congressman, it's too early, but if we are to engage in those services, we will partner with existing banks and financial institutions the same way that other payments companies have done it. And I'm talking here exclusively about the Libra wallet, and I think I need to be precise here.
Okay, with regards to the specific assets that you're going to hold in the reserve, who puts the money in, who puts the assets in to begin with, who owns those assets, what do you do with any dividends or interest or any returns on those investments that you make, who shares in those profits?
Congressman, the way the reserve is built is if consumers buy into Libra, the fiat money they use to buy Libra ends up in the reserve and is actually custodied with large banks, or potentially a better form of custody, even depending on the outcome of some of the conversations we're having with the G7 working group and the recommendations that they will come with. And so the reserve is always proportional to the number of Libra coins in circulation. And if the reserve generates a return, it will be used for two things. Number one, to pay for the association and the operation of the whole Libra network. And number two, to return some of the investment back to original investors and backers of the system that will put a lot of resources to get it off the ground.
One of the things that, as we look at this, if I have a business and I'm trying to sell, 1,000 widgets to some company in France, and I want to use the Libra system to be able to facilitate this. When I get done with this transaction, I have an income off that, and so I have to report that to the IRS. So is there a cost to change back from the Libra to the dollars, so that I then can explain to the IRS the kind of transaction and kind of money I'm earned off this transaction? Is there a fee for doing that when you transfer it back from Libras to dollars?
Congressman, there will be probably small fees, because there will be agents and exchanges that will be involved in the process of converting fiat into Libra and back to fiat. But from an IRS and tax standpoint, as far as the Calibra wallet is concerned, we will have the proper tools built into the product so that people can report their taxes.
Okay, my time is up. Thank you.
The gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Yes, Mr. Marcus, over here, this direction, this way. All right. Now, I've listened very attentively to your testimony and to the response of several of my colleagues' questions here, Ms. Waters, even Mr. McHenry, and you keep mentioning your white paper as a defense to the answer to their questions. But I want to call your attention to the fact that neither your white paper nor your subsequent Facebook posts offered any concrete details as to how you plan to implement or enforce strong anti-money laundering, how you plan to enforce Know Your Customer protections, and most importantly, to ensure, that's what all of us are concerned about, the safety of our financial system. So right now, tell us, what specifically, don't say the white paper, what are you going to do? What do you see as the responsibilities of Libra to combat anti-money laundering, to protect our financial system? Could you tell us right now? Just point it.
Yes, Congressman. Two parts to that answer. First, at the Libra Association itself. Libra Association will be based in Switzerland, but will still register with FinCEN, and as a result, we'll have an AML program, and we'll have guidelines for all the members to enforce the right KYC standards, AML, CFT programs. As far as the Calibra wallet is concerned, for every account opened, we will ensure that everyone KYCs appropriately with government-issued ID, and we'll have very strong AML programs.
Okay, but what about this, Mr. Marcus? Currently, the full responsibility to file suspicious activity reports are on our banks or other money service businesses, which law enforcement uses to investigate and prosecute criminal terrorists. And in your July post, you spoke only of the ability for these law enforcement and regulators to conduct their own analysis of off-the-chain activity. So, do you feel that this represents a shift away from Libra's own responsibility to monitor and enforce anti-money laundering or customer protections?
No, Congressman. The reason I wrote this is that the approach that Libra is taking is using a blockchain, and blockchain gives additional visibility to law enforcement and regulators compared to the current system to conduct their own investigations instead of solely depending on banks or regulated entities self-reporting. But that doesn't mean that we on the Calibra wallet side and all of the other members operating on top of this network will not have very strong AML programs and will not file suspicious activity reports.
All right, so now you're marketing this currency as a new entity to financial services. And with that will surely come new and innovative methods of committing financial crimes. What you bring is new. Criminals out there are going to invent ways to deal with it. So let me ask you, what are you anticipating as some of the new ways that criminals may attempt to export and exploit Libra for illicit use? And how are you combating to do this? I mean, you're planning something new, but you also got to have the ability to be able to not just look down the road, but be able to look around corners to see what that criminal has in store for us. What say you?
Couldn't agree more with you, Congressman, and I believe that we can improve on the current system because we have a chance this time around to think through the way that the network is designed, the way that the on and off ramps are properly regulated with proper KYC controls, the proper way to monitor activity and report it with new technologies. And I think that this system might be potentially better on these fronts.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus.
The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Huizinga, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And there is so much and so little time. I'm going to try to go through and get to some new territory. I was not planning on doing this, but you had used the term fiat currency a couple of times, and thought I knew what that meant, and it seemed a little odd that you were using it in the way that that you were, and so I went to Wikipedia. Fiat money is a currency without intrinsic value that has been established as money. Fiat money does not have use value and has value only because a government maintains its value or because parties engage in exchange to agree on its value. Wikipedia might need to update its definition a little bit because we see that, that people are using cryptocurrencies with no backing. And I am curious, why do you feel the need to have a reserve? Because it strikes me as you're using a fiat currency to create a fiat currency and to have a reserve of that.
Congressman, the reason we have a reserve is that we believe that to create a high-quality payment tool, we need that digital currency to be very stable. And as we've seen with a number of other currencies out there, digital currencies, they're very volatile, and as a result, they are not very good medium of exchange or payment tools.
So it's a trust issue?
No, Congressman. It's a stability issue. It's an inherent
well, I guess stability and trust.
Good money has, which is, you know, if it's stable, then it's good money. If it's not, then it's not.
But couldn't your stability be influenced by people's trust levels of the currency?
Yes and no. So, in other words, the way that
you fit perfectly into Washington with both a yes and a no, without hesitation. Okay. It does strike me, though, as a little bit, as many non-banked and underbanked, as you have said, as one of the goals of trying to get in it, get them involved in the financial space. Oftentimes, they are not in that space because they have a distrust of financial institutions, and it doesn't take anyone much time to find some well-publicized issues of trust with a number of the companies that are involved in Libra, and so I'm not sure exactly how you're going to address this, but let me get back to the regulatory implications of this. I had the pleasure of being the chair of the Monetary Policy and Trade Subcommittee at one point, as well as the Capital Markets Subcommittee, and I'm the ranking member now on that. And as I've always said, as we've been looking at these crypto assets, cryptocurrencies, and as the ranking member had asked, is it a security, is it an exchange-traded product? What exactly is this? Is it fish or fowl? And it seems that it's more of a platypus to me, that it kind of evolves in its different parts. And I'm curious, are you able to actually maintain the core and essence of a cryptocurrency and asset if you're really under all this regulation?
We believe we can, Congressman, because we believe that in order for any form of digital currency and payment system to reach mass adoption.
So would you like to see all of the other crypto assets and cryptocurrencies under the exact same regulation that you are, or are you trying to create and carve out this new product?
Congressman, I can't speak for other crypto assets.
Well, certainly you must have some thoughts on that, because if you're looking at it going, well, that's not working for them, otherwise, why would you be coming and asking for this regulatory burden?
Because we believe that this is a digital currency. If you compare it to other digital currencies or cryptocurrencies, it serves a different purpose. This one is to serve a purpose of payment. It's a payment tool. And as a result, when it reaches so many people, we believe that appropriate regulation and oversight is required.
So as we were having a little confab up here, and my friend French Hill said, you might be the equivalent of American Express traveler's checks of days of old.
I don't think of it that way, Congressman, but...
Okay. Well, yeah, for the lower dais and the staff, those were things that were actually paper, and you carried them with you. You bought them at a bank, right? You actually put in a fiat currency in towards it. But all right. There's my time has dwindled. I'm sorry. We've got a lot, and I have one last quick thing, which is the chair had asserted that you had not been in contact with FINMA, with the Swiss. Is that true or not true? Because you had said earlier that you have.
Congressman, we have been in touch with FINMA. The other agency was the privacy agency that we have not reached out to, but FINMA we have had continuous engagement with.
And I'll be following up with some written questions, so thank you.
The gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Perlmutter, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And I'm going to kind of take off where Mr. Huizinga just left off, just to help me understand the deal. So I have $5. I go and I buy 1 token of Libra for $5. You take that $5, and what do you do with it?
Congressman, the $5 you would use to buy Libra would end up being in the reserve. And so in the current contemplated basket, it would mean that $2.50 will be in the reserve, and another $2.50 of your dollars will be in a basket of euro, pound, yen, etc., in the reserve. And as a result, because the reserve is 1 for 1, your Libra unit of value will always be backed by the same value in the reserve at all times, guaranteeing stability and low volatility.
And that reserve is in the cloud, that reserve is in a bank, that reserve is where?
That reserve is custodied with very large global banks that provide custodial services to a number of companies. But this is something that we're also in discussions with the G7 working group to ensure that there's proper regulatory oversight in how the reserve is managed and how it's custodied as well.
All right, so we've got this medium, this currency of some sort called Libra, and now it's half here, half there. I want to use it. I want to buy something in Paraguay. So, which if I were using dollars was going to cost me $4. So how do I do that? Do I then go to CoLibra? And CoLibra is like my credit card, and it wires 4/5 of a token of a Libra to Paraguay?
Congressman, you would use any of the wallets, Calibra being one of them, to transfer the money that you wanted to transfer to that other country. And the way it would work is the same way that you would use any payment apps here in the U.S., like Venmo or PayPal.
So it's a wiring system, more or less, except that I'm using Libra. I mean, CoLibra is a wiring system. I mean, it's just Venmo. You know, I Venmo my daughter $20. Okay, it's just done, it's wired, it's over. I mean, I could have gone to the bank and they could have wired it to her. But I use Venmo.
It's very similar to your experience on Venmo, Congressman.
See, I think what we're struggling with is, what are you? I mean, you're a medium, you're an intermediary, you're facilitating financial transactions. And it isn't as if we haven't had problems with that in the history of the world. You got a money changer in the process, turning my buck into a Libra to a euro. So that's biblical. You've got, you know, I mean, the transaction is something we've had from the beginning of time. But it's a faster kind of wiring and more immediate transaction. Am I mistaken in that?
No, Congressman. It's also much lower cost for the people who end up needing it the most.
And I appreciate that. I mean, but for us, you know, we've seen banks fail. You know, we had the old saying, what's good for GM is good for America. And they had to go through a Chapter 11 back in the recession. You know, I don't think that'll happen to Facebook or whoever's backing this whole process. But it's possible. It's certainly possible. And so our responsibility is to your depositors or the people that buy these tokens or that use your credit card system. And so we're trying to figure out what kinds of regulations. And I think you're getting really good questions from both sides of the aisle because we all have this same question for you. And that's the resistance you're feeling because we think you're a bank, but you're not quite like a bank. And if you're a bank, we regulate the heck out of you because we've seen a lot of people lose money where there hasn't been regulation. So that's the resistance that I feel. I want to support your innovation. I want to support the efficiency that you people believe you're bringing to the table. But I also don't want anybody getting hurt here.
Congressman, we're completely aligned on that. We don't want anyone hurt, and we want the proper regulatory oversight, and this is why we have announced our plans very early, and we're here and engaging with all of the regulatory bodies here in the U.S. and around the world to ensure that we have the right regulatory framework and oversight, and we address all the concerns that were raised today, yesterday, and that were raised by Chairman Powell and others.
Thank you for your testimony.
The gentleman from Wisconsin's Mr. Duffy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Marcus, how are you doing? I got to tell you, this is absolutely brilliant, innovative, creative, and to come from Facebook and to leverage your network is pretty amazing. I was shocked at how bright it was. Not that you guys aren't bright. But quickly, who gets to use Calibra and Libra?
So anyone that can open a Calibra account, go through KYC in countries where we can operate.
You know, this is a $20 bill. Do you know who can use a $20 bill?
Yes, Congressman.
Who can use it? Or who can, maybe better question, who can't use a $20 bill?
I believe the answer to your question is anyone.
Everybody can use a $20 bill. This $20 bill doesn't discriminate on anything. You could be a murderer, you can say horrible things, you can say great things. This $20 bill can be used by every single person that possesses it. With regard to your network, can Milo Yiannopoulos or Louis Farrakhan use Libra?
Congressman,
and I bring that up because you know both those two individuals have been banned from Facebook.
Congressman, first, I want to say that...
No, simple question. Come, give me, we only have 5 minutes. You got to answer a question so we can do the best job in vetting what you want to do.
I know, but we must be thoughtful about those issues, Congressman, so I'm trying to respond appropriately. So, you know, on one side, I just want to stress that a platform that enables you to communicate and share ideas, Facebook, we believe, is a platform that accepts ideas across the political spectrum. It has to protect consumers from hate speech and others. And so that's one thing. When it comes to money...
I don't know. Can Milo use it? Can Louis Farrakhan use this system? They've been banned from Facebook. Can they use it? Yes or no?
Congressman?
Yes or no?
I don't know yet, Congressman, because we have...
If I'm a gun dealer who I can use a $20 bill because, you know, if it's a lawful gun, that happens all across America. On Facebook, you don't allow gun sales. So can a gun dealer who's abiding by American law, can they use your system?
So this is a question that is really important to get right, Congressman, and we haven't written a policy yet.
See, and that's what concerns me. I love what you're doing, but when we say we at Facebook are going to set the social policies of who can use this cryptocurrency, in a way, we get to set the social policy of who's in and who's out. And what's great about this is everybody gets to use it. And what I fear is, maybe in a roundabout way, what's happening in China with their social scoring. You get the right social score, you can get a loan, you can get an apartment, you can access the train. Maybe Facebook is doing the same thing here, where if you meet our social standards, which a lot of people here don't necessarily agree with your social standards, though we use your platform, that's the way you access the network. So we have to conform our behavior to the standards of Facebook to be on the network, where I think the right answer would be, listen, everybody, if you're abiding by the law, has access to this system.
Congressman, personally, I believe that we shouldn't be in the business of telling what people can do and deciding what people can do with their money or not. But that being said, this is an important question, and we need to be thoughtful about the policy.
But I think you're going to get some major pushback when we look at your network and you say who's on and who's off, and you're the judge and the jury. And for this system, I think you're going to see a lot of pushback, I think, from both sides. Go ahead, quickly.
This is why I believe we need to be very thoughtful about this, and my commitment to you
I think
is
the
that we
thoughtful
can
answer
follow
is,
up.
I'm going to behave like the fiat currency. The thoughtful answer is, if you abide by the law, you have access to it. That is the thoughtful and the right answer, but you haven't given me that, which gives me great pause and concern that the model of Libra is going to be the model of Facebook where we get to decide, and that concerns me. I'm also concerned about the data privacy and how you're going to use the data. A lot of us have had concerns about the data use on Facebook. How will you use this data? Because now what we post on Facebook and who we're friends with is one thing. How we spend our money is really powerful information, and you have access to that too. And I'd like to dig deeper with you on that point, but also, the freedom and liberty that comes from the 20, I think you should offer that same freedom and liberty on your network, and maybe we can talk more about that later. And I appreciate you coming and testifying, and kudos on the innovation. I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you. The gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Himes, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Marcus, thank you for being here. This has been one of the more interesting hearings we've had in a little while. In the last Congress, I had the honor of chairing the New Democrat Coalition of 104 Democrats. And if we do one thing, we get excited about innovation. But this is not an app that measures your heartbeat. This is a complete overhaul of the circulatory system of the global economy. So a lot of the concern you're hearing here, I think, is just around its sort of shocking ambition. And I want to ask you a specific question and take you through a specific scenario that gets at a larger concern that I have. And just so that folks at home can kind of follow along, let's just imagine that I'm an American user of Libra. And my rent is $1,000 a month. And just for simplicity's sake, let's say that this month it's 1,000 Libra a month. Now, because Libra is backed by a basket of currencies, let's just imagine that one of the currencies, sterling, devalues dramatically in 2 weeks. I think, if I recall my banking and economic days, that I will find that in the next month, my rent in Libra will be, let's just pick a number, 1,100 Libra, but still $1,000 a month. So you know what I'm getting at. Users will have the profoundly unfamiliar experience of assuming foreign currency risk. Am I correct in that?
Congressman, yes, there will be fluctuation, but the way that we're intending to design the reserve, again, in consultation with the G7 Working Group of Finance Ministries and central banks, is going to be in such a way that we have looked historically at the volatility that the dollar would have had in the last 20 years compared to Libra with the proposed basket. And if you look at the fact that half of the basket is dollars, it should be fairly stable. That being said...
But wait, you acknowledge, I got it, you acknowledge that consumers everywhere, users of Libra, will for the first time, if they have previously been using their domestic currency to purchase domestic goods, they will experience foreign currency risk.
They will have some degree of volatility.
Right. Okay, so my question, I think that's an important point for people to understand, and I'm not saying that's good or bad, but traditionally, the regulatory apparatus here has said that if you're going to assume an unfamiliar risk, that risk will be disclosed to you with full transparency. And the mechanism we have traditionally used to disclose that kind of risk is through public filings and disclosure. Now, you said this is not an exchange-traded fund. I'm a former banker. This looks to me exactly like an exchange-traded fund backed by a series of short-term instruments in foreign currency. It looks exactly like an ETF to me. It even has a creation and remittance mechanism. So elaborate for me on why this is not an exchange-traded fund, and if there's any ambiguity, what I really am getting at here is you need to clear, if in fact the regulators determine that it's an ETF, you need to clear 1940 Act registration hurdles. which that may sound technical, but that's designed to protect that rent payer who discovers that their rent went up for reasons they don't understand. So tell me why this is not an exchange-traded fund.
Congressman, 3 points of why we believe it is not. Despite the fact that you're right, that it uses some operational mechanisms that are similar, we believe that it is not, because Libra is a payment tool. And typically, if the question you're asking is whether we believe...
But wait, I need to stop you there. The SEC doesn't say if you're a payment tool, you're not an exchange-traded fund. The SEC says if you have a security that is backed by other securities, you're an exchange-traded fund. And you may quibble with me that you're not a security, but you're certainly backed by other securities. Is that not correct?
Congressman, it's mainly currencies, but I do want to answer your question. First, we believe that no one will buy Libra as an investment because it is designed for stability. That is number one. Number two is that when you look at the definition of the securities, or how we test, that has been used by the SEC, it actually uses the idea that you invest for a profit that will result in the management of the product. And this product is not a product, it's a payment tool. It's not going to be actively managed. And you cannot use an ETF for payments. This is actually designed as a payment tool to enable people to retain value, not to
So since I'm almost
value.
out of time, let's come back to my original question. How will you make transparent what you acknowledged is foreign currency risk that consumers will face? How do you envision doing that?
Congressman, as far as the Libra wallet is concerned, you will have transparency and education built into the product.
Okay, thank you. My time has expired. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Stivers, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome, Mr. Marcus. We all say we want to encourage innovation, and I appreciate your innovation, and I really do want to encourage innovation. And I'd just like to kind of walk through a timeline so we know where we are in the innovation process here. And correct me if I'm wrong, or I'll just ask a couple yes or no questions. It was about 60 days ago you announced the idea, correct?
Congressman, it was on June 18th, yes.
June 8th. That was the white paper was on June 18th, but I thought in May you put out there was nothing in May? Okay, so we're 30 days from the white paper. So this is a really early congressional hearing. I just want to, and with that, I'll understand that you won't have the answer to every question. I do appreciate your commitment to be willing to ensure that you, meet all the regulatory hurdles and comply with the law. The value I see in this innovation is, of course, for cross-border payments, because that's so expensive today. And a second, for the unbanked, and you talked about both of those domestically. But can you just tell us what's in it for somebody domestically that already has a bank account, is there, and isn't looking for cross-border payments? I don't see a big application for those folks.
Congressman, I'm glad you asked, because I doubt that people will pay their rents with Libra anytime soon, to just relay the question earlier. The general use case that we believe will happen in the U.S. When you have a bank account and you're properly banked is that if you want to send money abroad, you will connect your debit card with one of the wallets. You will buy just the right amount of Libra you need to actually make that cross-border transaction. You will save a lot in the process, but then if money comes back, you will redeposit it back to your bank account.
And so you don't expect people to be holding Libra, because the point is to have a stable currency, not a volatile currency. That's where the value comes in cross-border payments, because about 60% of the world's population lives in a country that does not have a stable currency. So I appreciate that, and I think there is some value in that. I do have some concerns about the potential of money laundering. As you know, cryptocurrencies and the Silk Road sort of started as a way to anonymously finance illicit activity, or as one of the early things that was used for. So I'm concerned about cross-border payments that then are going to people that have sort of bad intent. And I'm curious, will you put a limit on the amount of any individual transaction? And I know, again, it's early. I recognize the timeline of where we are. but do you expect to put a limit on how much somebody can transfer in Libra to someone else?
Congressman, we're going to continue our engagement, notably with Treasury, on this topic. And my expectation is that there will be limits depending on where the money is sent or where it's coming from. My hope is that between two consumers of American regulated wallets like Libra and others that will have proper KYC and AML, we can avoid having artificial limits. But we will probably need limits across the network to ensure that those activities can.
And I'm not asking you to put artificial limits in. I was just curious, and obviously I want to make sure you comply with Know Your Customer and anti-money laundering, because that is that's complying with the law, which you said you'd do, and I think that's really important.
Congressman.
Do you expect to have the Libra Association vote to exclude companies like Chick-fil-A or anybody else that might have social views that you disagree with?
Congressman, this is actually not going to be my decision or Facebook's decision. It's going to have to be a decision that is going to be taken by the Council of Members of the Libra Association and the Libra Association itself.
And I recognize that. I would just urge you, to not use this for social engineering, but use it to meet the intent that we talked about of helping the unbanked and helping people with cross-border payments. I hope that's the purpose and not just social engineering. I appreciate your time today. There are a lot of unanswered questions. I may send some in writing. I do appreciate the innovation, appreciate your time, and I look forward to working with you as you work to make sure that you follow every law and regulation. I know it'll be a challenge because you'll be dealing with, 200 countries' regulations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Congressman.
The gentleman from California, Mr. Sherman, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, we need to get Mark Zuckerberg here. This is the biggest thing, or it tries to be the biggest thing, this committee will deal with this decade. And while we have one of his employees here, this is Zuckerberg's program. Now, we're told by some that innovation is always good. The most innovative thing that happened this century is when Osama bin Laden came up with the innovative idea of flying 2 airplanes into towers. That's the most consequential innovation, although this may do more to endanger America than even that. People call this the Libra. It's not the Libra. If it finally happens, nobody's going to call it Libra. They're going to call it a Zuckbuck. This is Zuckerberg's baby. Now, Mr. Marcus gave me 2 promises in our conversation yesterday, both of which he knows they won't comply with. First, he promises that all the Know Your Customer and anti-money laundering is going to be adhered to. But that applies only to the Calibra wallet, and he hopes to have hundreds of other wallets created by others. Keep in mind, as to Bitcoin, 46% of the transactions, according to one academic study, are for drug dealers and other nefarious operations. Hamas advertises they want Bitcoin contributions. Bitcoin, however, has a problem. There's no off-ramp. There's no way to just go buy something with a Bitcoin. You can eventually with a Zuckbuck. And finally, the white paper put out by Facebook says, the Libra protocol does not link accounts to real-world identity. A user is free to create multiple accounts by generating multiple key pairs. So this is a godsend to drug dealers and sanctions evaders and tax evaders. Zuckerberg has billions, but he doesn't have the authority to print more until he gets this. We went from the US dollar. We went from the US dollar being linked to gold, and we only printed a number of dollars equal to the gold we had to the dollar becoming valuable in and of itself, and now we can print. How many dollars we print has nothing to do with how much gold we have in store. Mr. Marcus promised me that they would never do that, but then he testifies here that the Libra Association will make all the decisions and Facebook won't be in control. So much for those promises. America's power comes from the power of the dollar more, I think, than the power of our military. It lowers the interest rates in the United States by at least $1,000 a family. The seigniorage has allowed the Fed to transfer $100 billion in some years, so often less, to the Treasury. Our sanctions in Iran, which I've worked on for over 20 years, are effective only because of the power of the dollar. And we are able to go after human traffickers, drug dealers, and tax evaders because of the power of the dollar. We're told that they're going to solve two problems with this. They're not going to solve those problems. Cross-border transmission, let's do that in dollars. Or let's send Quetzals to Guatemala. You've got a multi-billion-dollar company, trillion-dollar company. Help people make those transmissions at low fees, but what, use dollars or use the local currency? And then we're told they're going to deal with the unbanked. If they wanted to help the unbanked, they wouldn't be using a cryptocurrency because cryptocurrencies are illegal in India, the place where they have more unbanked than anywhere else. They don't want to solve those problems. They want to solve two other problems. Problem number one, Zuckerberg can't print money yet. And problem number two, Zuckerberg is under attack because he invades the privacy of ordinary Americans and sells it to the highest bidder. He needs to be an advocate for privacy. And so he is creating a device which will provide privacy to drug dealers, human traffickers, terrorists, tax evaders, and sanctions evaders. We need Zuckerberg here because we need to tell him that he probably has the power to push this through. He'll throw around tens and hundreds of millions of dollars in Washington. His supporters will get huge Zuck bucks in US dollars. 100 lawyers will tell him that what he's doing is legal and therefore he's safe. But someone with an understanding of the politics of this country needs to explain to Mr. Zuckerberg that if cryptocurrency is used to finance the next horrific terrorist attack against Americans, 100 lawyers standing in a row, charging $2,000 an hour, are not going to protect his rear end from the wrath of the American people. This is an attempt to transfer enormous power from America to Facebook and a number of its allies. I'm surprised we need Zuckerberg here.
The gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Barr, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I think given the commentary we've heard in this committee hearing today and some of the very pointed questions directed your way, Mr. Marcus, I think we are discovering why a decision has been made to locate in Switzerland as opposed to the United States. Having said that, I do want to address some of the concerns that have been raised today and ask you about them. I think there are some legitimate questions that we can ask, but it does seem like in Washington, whenever the private sector produces some kind of innovation or new discovery or new advancement, politicians and bureaucrats rush to criticize and regulate. And there's always a presumption that the private sector innovating is a bad thing. I think the presumption should be totally reversed. I think we should presume that innovation is good. It presents enormous opportunity for financial inclusion, reducing friction in transactions. The opportunities that are created by this innovation is laudable. It's to be commended. That's not to say we shouldn't ask questions, but the presumption in this hearing room today seems to be in the wrong place. Let me ask you about the possibilities, the opportunities that this presents, particularly with respect to financial inclusion. What percentage of users on Facebook are underbanked or unbanked in the United States, Mr. Marcus?
Congressman, I don't have the answer for Facebook specifically, but I know that over 8 million households in the U.S. are...
Why don't you know how many Facebook, Facebook is often criticized for invading the privacy of Americans. Why doesn't Facebook know approximately how many of its 2.6 billion users are unbanked or underbanked?
Because there's no way for us to know that information.
Okay. Do you have any idea how many users of Facebook live in rural America or so-called bank deserts?
I don't have the exact number, Congressman, but we can. I can find out and follow up with your office.
Well, I mean, if you know or don't know, we'd like to know that. how will Libra and Project Libra promote greater financial inclusion in the United States?
Congressman, we believe that having the ability to access digital money where you can safeguard the value that you want to safeguard, but more importantly, transact with the people that you want to transact for free, simply with just a $40 smartphone and a basic data plan is something that would enhance the ability for people, even here in the U.S., despite the fact that we believe this is not going to be the main market for Libra. It will solve problems for lots of people here in the U.S., notably the very people who are unbanked today and send money abroad home, which makes for the bulk of the income of their families back at home.
Well, I won't ask a question, but I will just jump on to the point that Mr. Duffy was making earlier. I think that the opportunity for financial inclusion with Project Libra is enormous and very positive. I share Mr. Duffy's concern about what that inclusion actually means, and to the extent that Facebook and other social media enterprises have been criticized for political bias, I think that's important to earn the credibility of the American people that this platform, this financial platform, be viewed and earn the confidence as a neutral player. So that the adoption can serve all and really serve that ultimate purpose of financial inclusion. Final question, and this relates to the testimony that you've delivered, that this project will not compete with central banks or interfere with monetary policy. We've heard from the chairman of the Fed, Jay Powell, recently that whereas Bitcoin or other digital currency endeavors really do not present a challenge for central banks, that this could, because of Facebook's 2.8 billion users and the 1.6 billion daily users, that it does have the potential for widespread adoption big enough to potentially displace the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency and therefore interfere with central banking tools, interfere with monetary policy. Tell me how Libra will not undermine sovereign currencies and the power of central banks, or is the very point to undermine central bankers and to provide a greater freedom away from central banking?
Congressman, I want to be very clear. We do not want to compete with the dollar or with sovereign currencies. This is why they make the reserve. And even in our wildest dreams, never will we come anywhere close from the size of any of the currencies that you mentioned. But we will make sure to work with the Fed, with the Financial Stability Board, and with the G7 working group internationally to ensure that the proper controls and oversight.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you.
The gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Foster, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to also thank you for over here. As the, I guess, the co-chair of the Congressional Blockchain Caucus, as well as perhaps the only blockchain programmer and AI programmer in the U.S. Congress, I want to thank you for having rather detailed individual briefings with me on this. And there are a couple of things I was promised during those briefings that my staff tells me have not yet been delivered. One of them is when we got into a detailed discussion of how you would prevent this from being used for ransomware. I was promised that there would be an answer. Are you prepared to give that answer yet? If not, I'd like to drill down into just how anonymous these transactions in Libra actually would be.
Congressman, ransomware is a really important issue, and the way we're thinking about it as far as the Calibra wallet is concerned.
No, I'm interested in Libra, all right? Libra, which is, as I understand it, an anonymous bearer instrument. Is that correct?
Congressman, it is not anonymous.
Is self-custody allowed in Libra?
Congressman, yes, within limits, and as a result, we believe that especially in countries like the U.S. and others, you will have all the wallets that will have...
I'm not worried about wallets. I'm worried about abuse of self-custody. You know, if I own the cryptographic code for a piece of Libra, do I own that Libra full stop or not?
Yes, Congressman.
Yes, you do. Okay, now if I go on the dark web and start offering to trade that, do you have any technical way of stopping me for doing that anonymously?
Congressman, yes, because there are on and off ramps, and all of the on and off ramps are properly KYC'd.
All of them?
Yes, that will be.
So that once a large fraction of Libra would be transferred into self-custody, and then there starts to be a significant flow among the self-custody entities out on the dark web or other places. How do you prevent that from actually, allowing things like ransomware?
Congressman, again, a very important problem, and the way that we're tracking, the way that the association will enable tools so that law enforcement and the different wallets can understand where the movements are happening to prevent those issues is going to be one of the ways that we will address this. The other way that we will address...
So just right, we're going to have to be absolutely dependent on the fact that every single wallet is in a regulatory regime that we trust. Is that right? So if there's one wallet out in some set of islands or something like this that doesn't follow U.S., are we just out of luck there and that all of the illicit transactions will flow through there?
No, Congressman, because if you're a U.S. resident and you want to use a wallet, the wallet offering services in the U.S. will need to be properly regulated in the U.S.
All right, we have to have an ongoing discussion. I'd like to also mention cybersecurity. One of the main jobs of FSOC is to oversee cybersecurity and systemically important firms. Now, you've seen fit to make a new programming language for here, and I spent a little while looking over that. There's some creative stuff in it. Some of it's pretty much copying other things that have been done before. Some of it's brand new. But even if it had zero creativity in it, there would still be a problem that one wrong line of code could generate a hole that could crash the entire Libra ecosystem. All right, and so the governance of that language and all the infrastructure. I understand it was my reading you're going to be distributing runtime executables and things like that as well. And so that all of that has to be bulletproof cybersecurity. And I was wondering how you're going to deal with the governance of that.
Congressman, two ways. First, we agree with you that this is of absolute importance. And the way we're dealing with that is that the move language that you're referencing will have formal verification in place to avoid issues.
To the extent that there are no compiler bugs.
Yes, but the compiler, the compiler will not execute the code if the code is not formally verified. And we have the chance of having David Dill, who is a professor from Stanford in formal verification, helping us with this issue. The other thing that I want to say is that the association will have guidelines on what third-party code can be published or not. And at the very early stages, it will be very limited to a set of templates that will avoid the issues that you're raising.
All right, but it will be an ongoing target because if Libra is taken to scale, it will be an enormously fat target for cyber attacks, intrusion, insertion of insider threats, and so on. And so this is something that, is in terms of overall financial stability, probably as crucial as anything else. Thank you. Yield back.
The witness has requested a 10-minute break. The committee stands in recess.
First of all, there is that room on Capitol Hill, that congressional moratorium that Maxine Waters wanted so much, and yes, she is getting it. They're getting up. That was approximately 2 hours straight of congressmen and women grilling David Marcus, far more than what he went through yesterday at the Senate. With me, Usher Westrop Evans, senior correspondent, Block TV. The committee just went out on recess, luckily for David Marcus. Takeaways.
Wow, there's a lot to take out of that. There was a full gamut and a full range of views there being displayed from those in support. I mean, we heard an early statement from Ranking Member McHenry really saying that there was some support, but also really very wary of what's going to happen here. A lot
They
of
all
issues.
made a point. We're for innovation.
Exactly,
Yeah.
for innovation. Yeah, it was a line we heard repeatedly. But I guess the main theme to take away, the main takeaway that we cannot move past is definitions, identity. What is Libra? And there was a lot going on there. And a particular note that I want to make here that I think we saw in there with Marcus's responses was that sometimes he was speaking for Libra. Other times he was speaking for Calibra as the head representative of that, and he seemed to choose somewhat arbitrarily which side he was choosing
Very
to
much so.
focus on. And there were only a few Congress people who were there, who were focused enough or aware enough of the distinction
on that.
to really pick up on that. And so that's a really important point. We heard George Foster just there, who is a part of the blockchain caucus, a key member who knew what he was talking about and was able to say, I want you to speak on behalf of Libra, not Calibra. But there were many that missed that opportunity, and I think that allowed Marcus to get away with a few answers, though on the whole, he certainly was grilled. No two ways about that.
Entirely. And as you said, as you mentioned that fabulous point to ask also, what is Libra? Is it a security? Is it an ETF? Did you find that he could answer those questions?
No, he didn't have an answer to that question. The bucket answer, the paint by numbers answer that he clearly had and he clearly had planned beforehand was a straight and simple that we're still working on it. This is in collaboration. That's why we came out early. But it's a bold thing to come out early with, to be saying, and with an ambitious timescale plan of being ready by 2020, first half of 2020, really.
But and as all of this is going on, and we're still looking at pictures obviously from that hall, there's Maxine Waters, the woman who masterminded, the chairwoman of that committee. But the price of Bitcoin, and that's important to note, as this hearing has been going on over the course of 2 hours from 10 a.m. to noon Eastern time in the United States, there has been, and again, we don't know the correlation, but there has been a spike. If we had an option to look at the charts, there we go. There has been a spike of approximately what?
About 5% increase we've seen over that time. I mean, it's quite incredible to see how this has surged. Now, again, correlative, causative, who can say for sure? But I think when McHenry came out with that line at the start, Bitcoin is an unstoppable force. If I am an evangelist, and I won't say whether I am or not, but that is the line I would be painting across every place in the world. The ranking Republican member of the House Financial Services Committee
says Bitcoin is
an unstoppable force. It's unbelievable. I mean, that is so powerful. And generally, other than with the exception of Representative Sherman, who made some very interesting claims against Bitcoin, saying that 46% of Bitcoin purchases were used for crime and drugs, most of the Congress people were really making direct attacks on Libra.
And as we're looking at them breaking into recess out there at the Congress, just to conclude this as well, Sherman wasn't, holding back as well, making a very good point. Why are you, David Marcus, here? Why are you sitting in that chair? Do you believe that the way to see this forward, do you think Zuckerberg is ever going to sit in that committee, and why isn't he there?
No, I mean, personally, I think from a marketing perspective, it would look bad for Zuckerberg to be there. It would look like he was representing Libra when that is entirely what they're not supposed. They're aiming not to do. They're aiming to distance themselves from Libra. Facebook and Libra are two separate entities, and they're a peer among many. It's not the same thing. So Zuckerberg would never come out in conjunction with that directly, because
and that's exactly the reason he's not there.
The vision, exactly.
The vision, exactly.
But that being said, it is very understandable when you get to this, as we've said repeatedly, Facebook are the only ones that have had representatives come out and speak about this publicly, and really they're very much steering the ship, something that even now has actually been admitted to in his opening statements by David Marcus, that Facebook is leading the ship throughout 2019, yet magically by 2020 it's supposed to all fall into place with them but a peer, even though they set up the whole
This
system.
is a story that's become incredibly important also in the road up and the lead up to those elections, 2020 being such a key date. That said, the committee, the House committee chaired by Maxine Waters, wrapping for a recess there. It is noon Eastern time, and of course they'll be back with expert witnesses. This was, though, the grilling of David Marcus, and very much so, not so many answered questions, but maybe the highlight, as Asha Westrop Evans mentioned, is having a congressional member basically say Bitcoin is unstoppable, which is a fascinating thing on its own. We were Block TV. We'll be following all these events as they unfold, and we'll be back.
afternoon.